You need to know this. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is now spending his third night in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, out of the reach of British police who are trying to extradite him to Sweden. In Sweden, Assange has been accused of sexual assault, though he has not been formally charged with that crime. And Assange fears if he's extradited to Sweden, he'll then be handed over to authorities in the United States, who are apparently building a case against him, alleging that he's guilty of espionage and treason, crimes punishable by death. Fearing for his life, Assange is waiting a decision from Ecuador as to whether or not they will grant him political asylum and then give him safe passage out of the UK and into Ecuador. So far, as far as we know, no decision has been made yet by the Ecuadorian government. And if Julian Assange were to leave the Ecuadorian embassy, he'd be arrested immediately by British authorities. Clearly, the ongoing trials and tribulations of the WikiLeaks founder have entered a new phase. Joining me now to discuss what exactly is going on in London and the role the United States plays in all of this is Michael Radner, a lawyer for Julian Assange and President Emeritus of the Center for Constitutional Rights. Michael, welcome.
Tom, it's good to be with you and good to hear such an accurate summary of the case. Very unusual among any journalist I know.
Well, thank you for that validation. I'm glad we got our facts right. If Julian Assange is, he's concerned that if he's extradited to Sweden, that they're going to ship him off to the United States. How valid or legitimate is that concern? And what might he expect to happen if he is extradited from Sweden to the United States?
You know, Julian Assange didn't have any really good choices after he lost the High Court case in England that ordered his extradition to Sweden. His two choices were to basically be arrested and taken to Sweden by July 7th. And then in Sweden, as you said, he was facing allegations of sexual abuse and rape under Swedish law. But that, you know, I don't think that was his worry at all. I don't think that would have been sufficient for him to make what was a very difficult choice to go into the Ecuadorian embassy, see if they give him asylum, and if they give him asylum, then how does he get out of the embassy without a safe passage, which is not guaranteed. So his choices were difficult. And the reason they were so difficult is because once he gets to Sweden, and of this I'm convinced, that even if those charges go away, or even if they don't, it's not going to be a huge sentence in Sweden if he's convicted, if any, and it's very likely as well that it could go away after they hear his story. We just don't know. But that certainly is nothing compared to the threat of the United States grabbing him when he's in Sweden. So let's say, for example, he was allowed to walk out of that court because the charges are dismissed or whatever, he's finished doing whatever he needs to do in Sweden. Let me tell you, the minute that happened, he will not get out of the courthouse. The U.S. will file an extradition warrant with the court in Sweden. Julian Assange will be back in prison. And that's an important point. You know, when he goes to Sweden, if and when if he had gone to Sweden, they have no bail in Sweden for pre-trial. He would have been put in prison right away. Then the U.S. would have filed its extradition. Julian Assange would never get out of prison and would wind up in the United States, and we can talk about what would happen to him here. And he wouldn't have had any chance to apply for political asylum, which my view is that as a persecuted person because of his political actions, which is to say, revealing on his publisher's website hundreds of thousands of documents on the Iraq War, on the Afghan War, the collateral murder video, and all the State Department cables, that he would have faced really incredible repression in the United States, which we can talk about.
Well, and let's talk about that. But first, just the step from the embassy out of the UK. China had a famous dissident a few weeks ago. They let him get, you know, he sought asylum in the U.S. embassy. They said, okay, fine, you can go to the airport and get on a plane and go to America. Is the UK that much more repressive than China?
Tom, it's really an important example you're raising, really important. Because here you have someone who much of the world, particularly the 99%, or certainly a lot of people in countries where the U.S. Has exploited them or gone to war, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, would say that Julian Assange is a hero and should have a right to political asylum, and there should be officials going over there and telling the British not only when he gets political asylum he should get it, but that he should then be out of the country, much like Chen was in China. But of course we don't see that. We see the world reversed. But this is a problem. let's assume, which we don't know yet, that Ecuador gives Julian Assange political asylum. How does he then get from the sacrosanct embassy property where the British cannot touch him to an airplane to fly him to Ecuador? And you mentioned it in your introduction. He needs a safe passage. Will Britain give him a safe passage? Are they too much, enthralled to the United States? I don't know the answer to that. Let's hope they would, because he is someone who will then have political asylum, and they should. So that is a problem. And the example that comes to mind, of course, a bad example, is Cardinal Machinsky, who, whatever people thought of him, took refuge in the Budapest embassy during the Cold War in Hungary, stayed there not for 1, but for 14 or 15 years before he got a safe passage out. So I would hope that doesn't happen. I would hope Julian Assange can get the asylum, get the safe passage, and get to Ecuador, where he, as he's always wanted to continue his work of transparency and making this world a place that is less secret, more public, and more democratic.
And if Julian Assange successfully, or let's say he's unsuccessful, excuse me, you suggested we continue that conversation. Sweden snatches him, or he gets caught in the UK, or somehow he gets here to the United States. What would he expect? I mean, Bradley Mannings seems like the template for this, is he not?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, Tom. I was going to say, I know you covered Bradley Manning, and of course, Bradley Manning is the template. For your listeners, or your viewers, Bradley Manning was the Army private who allegedly had security clearance and went into his computer, supposedly, and got a hold of these hundreds of thousands of pages of documents and allegedly uploaded them to WikiLeaks. He is in Fort Meade now in a court-martial, but he was kept for 9 months in conditions that even the UN rapporteur for torture, Juan Mendez, said constituted cruel and inhuman treatment and may well have constituted torture, except that Juan Mendez, the UN rapporteur, never got to visit him. Stripped to the bone, made to have no clothes inside, stand up at attention nude, bad situation, very bad, and now facing a court-martial, treated terribly. You can expect that Julian Assange, if he comes into this country, if he's snatched, if he's gotten into this country by whatever means, that he will be in a solitary confinement unit with no visitors except his lawyers, no ability to communicate with the outside world at all. If I go visit him, will not be able to say anything to the outside world about what he said. He will be in that, quote, pre-trial without bail for years until the trial starts. And then the trial will be a trial, presumably, on conspiracy to commit espionage, a count that certainly a number of counts that could lead to a life sentence. And of course, one of those provisions has a death penalty sentence as well. So it will be a horror if Julian Assange is here. It will be a fundamental human rights violations about the way he's held, as well as the charge. I mean, the idea that this Australian man, who owes no particular allegiance to the United States, is tried for taking what they classified as documents, which are documents that reveal war crimes, that he is tried for that, while thousands of ours go, thousands of other people, including Obama, reveals drone strikes and secret worms that go into the Iran computers, and he isn't facing what Julian Assange is facing. So it's an outrage if he is ever charged here or brought here. My hope is that he gets asylum and gets himself to Ecuador.
Absolutely. The people who wrote the Constitution, and particularly the Bill of Rights, must be rolling in their graves. Michael Ratner, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Tom, it's always great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This isn't about the sexual assault charges in Sweden. We should just be very clear about that. Julian Assange has not even been charged, and certainly not tried or convicted of any crime in Sweden. And under Swedish law, he's innocent until proven guilty. This is about the United States getting a hold of Assange and holding him as a political prisoner. As Glenn Greenwald points out in The Guardian, the primary fear is being turned over to the U.S. That is the crucial context for understanding Julian Assange's 16-month fight to avoid extradition to Sweden, a fight that led him to seek asylum Tuesday in the London embassy of Ecuador. Obama's Department of Justice has convened a grand jury to investigate Assange. There are accusations that Assange violated the Espionage Act of 1917, which is punishable by death. Assange highlighted that point in his letter to Ecuador's president seeking asylum. Both Democrats and Republicans in Congress have called for prosecution of Assange, and the mainstream media has been piling on Assange too, with some commentators calling for his death. Sweden has a long history of doing the bidding of the United States for less than noble reasons. In 2006, for example, the UN ruled that Sweden violated the global torture ban by helping the CIA extradite 2 suspected terrorists to Egypt, where they were tortured. Those suspects were in Sweden seeking asylum. Assange is afraid the same thing will happen to him if he winds up in Sweden. And it's a reasonable fear, particularly considering what happened to Bradley Manning, the man suspected of handing over the documents to Assange in the first place. Manning has been in custody since May of 2010 and spent 11 months in solitary confinement that the UN called cruel and degrading. The U.S. has lost its way. From drones to indefinite detention to an attack on whistleblowers to a corrupted criminal justice system that shields powerful people like Karl Rove while going after those who speak truth to power. You know, as Americans, when we think of political prisoners, we typically think of China or Iran or Syria. Yet political prisoners have become a reality in the United States. Don Siegelman, Karl Rove's sworn enemy, is already one. And Julian Assange could be the next one.